In today's episode, I sit down with Charles Wu from Chitiva. Charles's name might sound familiar, and that's because he was recently on the Chillinois podcast. If you go to episode number 295 of the Chillinois podcast, you can see his most recent appearance. In that appearance, we talked about the most recent legislative push to try and regulate hemp in Illinois. We'll be continuing that discussion today. Before I send you into this discussion, which was recorded on July 14th, 2023, I wanted to make a point that I wasn't able to get Charles to acknowledge on air. A lot of the products that he sells in his stores are arguably the exact same thing or very similar to what can be found in the dispensaries in Illinois. I bought these two products, for example, THCA flower. And for all intents and purposes, it's just like cannabis you can find in the store. Watch. When I smoke it, it gets me high. What's the difference, though? How is Charles able to legally sell this product in his stores? Well, first of all, Charles is not the only one, and Charles is not, I wouldn't say he has a particular focus on THCA. He offers a wide variety of cannabinoids, but THCA really stands out to me because, like I say, this product that I have in my hands right now is basically exactly what you would find in a dispensary. But before I put some proof into the pudding on that, let's talk about why you might be familiar with THCA. What is THCA? Well, first, you might be familiar with THCA because Cookies, a really popular cannabis brand, has started mail ordering THCA products. So I'm displaying their website right now. We'll see how long this stays up. thca.cookies.co. So, as you can see, you can buy several varieties of THCA products, including flower, which is what I bought from Chitiva. You can buy pre-rolls, which is also flower. Vapes will be coming soon. Concentrates, gummies, hard candies, chocolates, and even beverages, right? And it's all legal, and it's shipping to many states that you wouldn't think are legal, but technically hemp is legal. So that segues into what is THCA flower or THCA products. Well, technically speaking, it's hemp. What is hemp? Well, hemp is cannabis, and cannabis is the plant that we all love. But because we're stupid, in the United States, we've created a legal distinction between products, well, between the plant, and it's completely arbitrary. And if you'd like a little bit more proof to the pudding of our kind of classification of cannabis and hemp being arbitrary, I recommend that you check out episode number 321 featuring a faculty member from Southern Illinois University. His name is Daniel Silver, and he talks about how the definition of hemp was created and how it really seems to be arbitrary. What am I referring to with arbitrary? Well, hemp is defined as any cannabis that has 3% of THC in it. I believe that's how it works. So under 0.3% THC. I get a little confused on this because, in statistics, I was taught that 3% is 0.03 and 30% is 0.3. But sometimes I see this displayed as 0.3%. Sometimes I see it just, people talk about it as 3% of the dry product can be THC. Sometimes I see it written as 0.03% or 0.03. It's very unclear to me, but it seems to be some number with 3 in it. It's a low number. And so I'm adding this clip in after I recorded this entire podcast, like this segment specifically, because the fact that I was unable to be clear about whether it was 0.03% or 0.3% really bothered me. From what I'm able to tell, and I'm just going to use the easiest source I can from Cookie's website that I display in this podcast. They cite the 2018 Farm Bill as saying the term hemp means the cannabis means the plant, cannabis sativa L, and any part of that plant, including the seeds thereof and all derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, salts, and salts of isomers, whether growing or not, with a delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol concentration of not more than 0.3% on a dry weight basis. So, and when I Google 0.3% THC, all the sources on Google say that that is what the definition of hemp is. So I want to state it clearly. It is 0.3%. I think the reason I get confused is because when I hear people say 3% as a decimal, I think 0.03. But the legal definition is 0.3%. And once again, if you'd like a little bit of history into why that is the way that it is, we recently sat down with a faculty member at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale to talk about this exact subject. Once again, that episode is number 321 of the Chill Illinois podcast featuring Daniel Silver. Enjoy the rest of the episode, and please ignore when I say 0.03 or whatever else I might say. The bottom line is the definition of hemp from the Farm Bill, as I read it, is 0.3% THC. Enjoy the rest of the episode. The idea is, if I could do it visually, it's like if you're above the 0.3, then you're illegal. You're cannabis. You could get high off of it, so it's illegal, right? If it's under 0.3% THC, then it is hemp. We have a legal definition for what is hemp and what is not hemp. As I understand it, the Farm Bill originally legalized hemp in 2014. It was also updated in 2018. And ultimately, I believe whatever happened in 2018 ultimately kind of opened up the door to what we're seeing today, which is a lot of these alternative cannabinoids becoming very popular. THCA is one you don't hear a lot about. I believe it's becoming more popular. Mostly you hear about Delta 8, or you might be very familiar with CBD. There was a huge CBD trend. Fucking Family Video became a CBD dispensary, essentially. Maybe that's an anecdotal experience for me, but the point I'm trying to make is it seemed like everywhere started selling CBD. Literally, my buddy's grandma started selling CBD. That sounds like it's like a joke, like everybody and my buddy's grandma, but no, literally, my buddy's grandma started selling CBD. The gas station sold CBD. And why did this all happen? Well, because we defined what is hemp and what is not. And again, it's seemingly very arbitrary. And I just want to kind of correct something that I said earlier. Again, you would think that because technically this product has 0.3 or 3 or 0.03, whatever the fucking number is, that's what this product has. That's why it's able to be legally sold in a store like Chitiva or online through mail order by Cookies. It has less than the amount of THC, which legally makes it hemp. So this product is apparently hemp. And so the point I'm trying to make, ultimately, again, I don't know if I already said this, but these products are extremely similar to what you will find in the dispensary. And just to kind of prove my point, I'm going to take a look at, I already took a look at a dispensary menu, and I picked out a number of products that would legally qualify as hemp. And I found other products that are just damn close. And so again, these are at dispensaries in Illinois. Let's look at the first product that I found. It's acai mints by Grassroots. And as you can see, it's got 0.01% THC. That's hemp. Now, what's funny is, I wanted to correct something I said earlier. You will get high by consuming this product or consuming the product that I'm showing you here. You will get high. So what happens is THCA turns into THC, right? So this has 0.01% THC. This product by, I don't even know who, banana puddingtane flower, 0.01% THC. This Interstate 420, which I recognize as a new era cannabis brand, or maybe it's IESO since they're partnering now. This has 0.01% THC. This is hemp, but it's sold in a cannabis dispensary. The point I'm making is these companies could sell it at the gas station if they wanted to. If they wanted to. And if you wanted to, here's another one that's pushing the limit. Landslide flower, 0.34%. So that one's pushing it. I think that is technically over the limit. Here's another one that's close. 93 boys, jet fuel OG. This is basically hemp. This is another one that I found surprising. This is supposed to be, Cresco's craft cannabis. You'd think that it would be a little bit more quote unquote mature. And you can always expect a beautifully manicured bud harvested right off the vine. It's getting really close to hemp territory. Here's another one by 93 boys that's really close to being hemp. And then another one from FloraCal, a Cresco product, very close to being hemp. And this one's a little bit further away from being hemp, but still really goddamn close. If they wanted to, they probably could have just harvested it a little bit earlier, and they could have sold it as hemp. That's not necessarily their business model, of course. The reason they're not selling it as hemp, because good luck charging, those prices for hemp. Well, I say that, let's take a look at what Cookies is charging for their hemp. Now, this might be boutique hemp. You might actually get better deals from other hemp suppliers, but let's just take a look. Oh, it's out of stock. Well, that's good for them. Out of stock. Do we got an eighth? Can you just show me? It looks like maybe an eighth would be $50. So, that makes sense. Cookies is selling it for the same price that they sell it in legal markets. And what you'll notice is that they're not really selling in any of the states that I think they have a large presence in. I mean, they might be in Colorado, and I'm pretty sure they're in Nevada. But I feel like the places they are and aren't selling their products are very strategic. I don't know. That's just me speculating, though. Anyways, what you're about to watch is my conversation with Charles from Chitiva. Again, the point in getting into all of that was not to get anybody like Charles in trouble. It's actually to empower others to join the movement. If you can do this, why the hell aren't you? Open up your storefront and start selling these products. Look, I showed you, I think, about 5 products that looked like, from what I can tell, they were hemp or close to it. Why can't you do that? I mean, you could. And that's kind of one of the points that Charles makes in today's conversation. I hope you find value in this conversation. Once again, it was recorded on July 14th, 2023. Enjoy. Well, I'm here at Chitiva right now trying, it's the flight of your slushies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Rainbow Flight.
The Rainbow Flight. And it's tasty, folks. It's really tasty. I like that I can just get the slightest hint of cannabis.
Oh, you can
it's
taste
the slightest
hint.
But I know that when I taste that a bit, I know I'm going to feel something. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's very nice, though. Well, hey, reintroduce yourself for folks that don't know you. You were recently on, but in case folks missed it.
Great. Thanks for having me again. My name's Charles, and I'm the principal and the guy behind Chitiva. We're a hemp-derived cannabinoid cafe concept. We currently have 2 locations in the Chicagoland area, one in Wicker Park, which is where we're at, one in the southwest suburbs, and we're currently in the process of opening over in the next 60 to 90 days 2 more locations. One will be in the South Loop near Grant Park, and the other will be in the West Loop in the Fulton Market area.
Nice. So you're going to be all over the city. I think that blue one's my favorite so far.
You like the Blue Dream?
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, cool. Yeah. For folks that didn't get what you just said, I want to put it out there more clearly. You can legally purchase cannabinoids at Chitiva. Like, it's a legal high. Like, I'm going to get high off of this. So I thought it'd be good to lay it out there.
It's not just getting high, right? The cannabis plant has a variety of cannabinoids, and the main thing that separates industrial hemp from marijuana is a compound called delta-9 THC. And as long as the plant has less than 0.3% delta-9 THC by dry weight,
Right.
it's industrial hemp.
Right.
Now, what we can do, or what we do, most people just think the whole world's THC, and they think everything non-THC is CBD.
Yeah.
But outside of just Delta 9 THC, there's Delta 8 THC, Delta 10, THCV, THCA. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. So we're able to extract all these other termed minor cannabinoids from the plant.
Yeah.
And even in some cases, we also extract Delta 9 THC. And then the main thing is we have to make sure that the end product has less than 0.3%
Right.
Delta 9 THC and everything like that. So we can create all sorts of interesting cocktails, infuse them into baked goods, infuse them into food service items, and everything on that front.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting. In many ways, the market's fascinating because since we're legally industrial hemp, it's an agricultural byproduct.
Yeah.
So this is no different than going to Jamba Juice and getting some ginseng extract or monk fruit extract, or you name it, on that side, maybe a B12 supplement.
Yeah.
On that front, right? So we're doing this with all the minor cannabinoids.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, this, I'm trying your rainbow slushy flight right now, but you've got more than that. You've got the flour, and we'll show it in the B-roll. I'll have footage right now, but you've got flour, you've got pastries. Say some other things maybe I'm missing.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're really well known for our, I guess you can call them edibles, but really it's the pastries. Our chef here has actually won a James Beard Award for chocolate. So the guy is just phenomenal. And hopefully it'll come up, when you stay later for our muffin tasting. We're trying out about 5 or 6 new muffin flavors, right? Everyone loves blueberry, but we want to kind of switch it up. So, well, you'll see in the pictures, they look amazing.
Yes.
And everything on that side. So yeah, we love to do fun things. And really what this is about is, I like to look at it as, we're still in the early stages of legalization in cannabis. And, the MSOs have done a decent job with Delta 9, but that's just, like, imagine if, like, the entire world of alcohol was just vodka.
Right.
There are some days where vodka's great, but sometimes I want, a lighter feel, maybe rum, maybe I want a spirit, maybe I want a heavier feel, like a whiskey.
Yeah.
There's all these sorts of things, and even you go to the cannabinoids, right? You go THCA, Delta 8, Delta 10, THCV. I mean, there's all these different effects that one can get. It's not always just let me get high and euphoric.
Yeah.
Maybe I want like a little milder buzz. Mm-hmm. Maybe I want the stress relief or the pain relief on the body without getting the paranoia in the head.
Yeah.
Like there's all these different things that are still to be discovered. So we aim to offer all those effects and let people enjoy them in a fun and communal type environment. So it's not like you're getting detention to go pick up your package.
Yeah. Well, I just heard you talking about the omnibus process, and that's one of the main things I wanted to talk to you about today. We've discussed it, but there has been, I feel like, a bit of an addition to the language I've heard with regard to people that are leading these proposals. So last I spoke to you, and I think the people from like the Illinois Hemp Growers Association, they were saying, here's what we can get down with. Age requirements, which is something you do right up front. You ask people for their IDs. Mm-hmm. Testing, it's something that's offered for all your products. Mm-hmm. Labeling, all your products are labeled. Mm-hmm. And then we basically agreed, like, that's it. Well, I've recently heard, like, LaShawn Ford and somebody that you actually introduced me to. I had Glenn McElfresh on the show.
Oh, nice.
And they both have made the point to talk about taxes and strict licensing. They did clarify to me that by strict licensing, they did not mean limited licensing, and they simply meant that if people weren't conforming to those regulations I was just listing off, that there'd be a punishment, right? Yeah. That's what they meant by strict licensing, at least that's what they told me. The taxes thing, I get it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but what is your stance on the addition of those components to the conversation here? Or do you have
Well,
anything?
I mean, we're fans of, I guess you can call it licensing. I would actually classify more as permitting.
Okay, yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
when I think license, I think there's a limited number. When I think permits, it's, tomato, but
Yeah.
a permit's something as if you follow the rules, if you comply, if you do these sorts of things, you can then play the game or you can be in business.
Yes.
And if you don't, you have repercussions
Right.
that make it where you can't be in business or you have to remedy things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, me personally, I'm a believer, I guess having always been an entrepreneur, how do I say this? It's not that I love competition, but I think competition brings out the best in everybody, and it creates those avenues for innovation and growth.
Yes.
And entrepreneurism, you name it, right? So I'm a believer, I want permits. So it's not like I don't want barriers to entry, but it's more of as long as you can meet the requirements to play by the rules, right? Like, start opening a restaurant.
Yeah.
I have to abide by food safety laws. I have to make sure that my people are trained. There's a bunch of things that have to be done, right? Or if I want to become a physician, I have to go and say, okay, well, I got to go to med school, I got to go to training, I go to residency, or if I want to go to a lawyer, I have to pass the bar. Those are permits, right? Because there's no limit, or I don't know, maybe there is, but from my understanding, as long as you satisfy the requirements and then you go past the bar, you can then practice law.
Yeah.
And then the market will kind of differentiate, who becomes a successful lawyer or not. And there's many lawyers who pass the bar that actually don't even practice.
Yeah.
Because it just wasn't their thing.
Yeah.
So going back to call it, what you mentioned that Rep Ford talked about and Glenn discussed, I like a lot of those things because, we've all seen whenever you have a new industry, there's always going to be bad actors, right? People who maybe advertise products, maybe put too much stuff in them, maybe just cut corners and things like that. And we need permitting, or we need standards so that things are safe, right? Imagine if food wasn't permitted, you'd have people, serving 4-day-old pizza, and people would get sick, right? So we don't want those sorts of things going on. But so I'm a believer in those, call it stringent requirements to protect public safety, to make sure that there's accurate labeling, to make sure that products are properly tested, and to ensure there's consumer safety and good products for everyone out there.
Yeah.
When it comes to limits, again, I think it should be available to anyone who's willing to give it a try.
Yeah.
And willing to abide by those requirements. And we shouldn't, it's not my place, or I feel someone's place to pick winners and losers. Let's let everyone get in, and someone who innovates comes up with something great. And, if they service a niche that isn't being serviced out there, more power to them. And that's wonderful.
Yeah.
To each their own. Now, when it comes to taxation,
really quick before taxation, it sounds like you have an abundance mindset where it's like there's enough for everybody, versus folks that advocate for a limited license market where they have a scarcity mindset where they say, well, if there's too much for everybody, then the prices get too low and we can't make enough money. Would you agree with how I just kind of put the dichotomy there for you?
I can see both sides of that.
Yeah.
Right. One of the rationales for creating a scarcity type scenario was under the guise of, say, social equity, right?
Correct.
So you have someone who may not have access to resources, and if they can win a scarce license, then perhaps they can parlay that into a financing opportunity or an investment opportunity that they otherwise might not have gotten.
Right.
And I understand that rationale. I think it's a little too optimistic, and then it kind of falls down in the real world. Right, you look at right now, Illinois, in terms of licenses on a per capita basis, it's still one of the most limited licenses out there.
Yeah.
And despite all that, out of the, it's been now almost 2 years, right, since the 200 or so dispensary licenses got released, and there's only 15 of them that are up and operational, even though they're all social equity.
Right.
The reality is anyone who really was social equity still can't attract the funding. And the ones that are existing are there not because they were social equity, but because they were people who might have gamed the systems and actually are MSOs, funding social equity entities or, on paper from that front.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that, at the time it made a lot of sense and it's a good effort, but I think the market, we tried that. That didn't work.
Right.
And the definition of insanity is trying to do the same thing over and over again and hoping for different results.
And like you say, there were good intentions behind it, and I've heard people talk about exactly what you said, but the time-old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And my biggest thing is, I see the logic. You and I both see the logic in the limited licensing and how you could potentially give somebody who didn't have that opportunity an opportunity to gain intergenerational wealth. But the sinister thing about it all, and my number one issue with the limited license market, is how it's enforced. Like, if you were to try to do quote unquote exactly what they're doing, they would throw the book at you. But since you're doing it under this like hemp, let's call it a loophole, I know you might disagree.
It's federally legal.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it. The federal law is ahead of state law in this case. But if you were to do what they do, they throw the book at you just like they would have before 2019. And that is my main contention with limited licensing. It's like, it's not a permitting fee. It's like, well, you didn't have a permit, so we're going to give you a ticket. It's, you didn't have a permit, let's go to jail. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the repercussions are, they're pretty high.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you get a slap on the wrist.
Right.
It's some pretty serious consequences.
Yeah.
For being on the wrong side of.
And we'll get back to being on the wrong side, but I wanted to give you the opportunity in the space to talk about taxes because I cut you off and we got into limited licensing.
Yeah, I mean, taxes it's a reality of life, right? If you're going to have regulations, if you're going to have these sorts of things, there's work involved to maintain, track, and or enforce them, right? To police these regulations. So as a result, you need some sort of financing to make that happen. Right. And then there's other benefits or ramifications that are helpful. Like, one of the nice things about the cannabis tax is that some percentage of that revenue goes back to help disadvantaged communities. It's the R3 program. And then another percentage of that revenue goes into a fund to provide technical assistance or loans or grants to qualified social equity type businesses.
Yeah.
So I don't see an issue with those sorts of things as long as we, set those funds up. So, because the question then is, well, if anyone get a permit, social equity players will get edged out. And we definitely don't want that happening. It's just not good for anybody. So perhaps we implement a reasonable tax instrument, and then we utilize some of those monies to give social equity entrepreneurs a chance.
Thank you.
And then what happens, though, is it's not like it's a lottery where people are arbitrarily chosen. It's the most qualified social equity candidates who can kind of get through the process and rise to the top. They will then get the chance. And maybe it's a progress payment thing. It's one of those things. I think it's important to recognize that we're still all learning, and that there's lessons learned from every attempt in every market. Yeah. So I feel Illinois's attempts at social equity, sure, it didn't work out, and we can always point fingers, but it was a good attempt, and there's a lot of positives that came about from that. Now,
cool.
Now there might be other types of things that we can learn. And one of the things that I find interesting is in some other markets that quote unquote have it's like unlimited but limited licenses. You look at, say, Michigan or Massachusetts, anyone could get started in the process. It was unlimited, but it was all about getting through to the end. And there were certain permit limits where maybe the town could only handle 5 of these establishments. So, the first 20 can go at it, and if you get through each gate, and if you don't get through the gates in time, then, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
On that front. And perhaps what you might do is you would tie social equity into that. Maybe they get preference in terms of passing through gates.
Yeah.
And then you can even handle the funding or whatnot where, okay, well, we're not going to just give everyone $1 million because there's not enough money to go around, but maybe to get through stage 1, everyone gets $25,000.
Mhm.
So that's enough to get you through stage 1, and maybe you have to match it or raise a little bit more money to go. And then once you get past stage 1, then for stage 2, there's another tranche and so forth. And I mean, I'm not a policy maker, so I don't have all these answers, but I'm sure there's ways to do that.
Yeah.
But to do that, one needs to have financing for that, and taxation is a method to raise dollars to finance these sorts of programs to help the community through reinvestment such as R3, or to help social equity enterprises get off the ground through grant programs through, say, the DCEO or other statewide organizations that know what they're doing in regards to this.
Yeah. Well, thank you for breaking that down. I recently had Chris Berry from Illinois Hemp Growers Association on the show, and we were in a meeting with him together, and you had addressed some of the comments that he made. Would you be willing to kind of rephrase that, if you will? And my apologies, I just thought of it now, so for not jogging.
Yeah, I don't recall the specific comments, so if you could refresh my memory.
You made some comment about, it was like maybe that he didn't fully address something, and you mentioned like maybe it's being a bit too optimistic because there were connections at IDFPR with like a Verano, something or another. Does that ring any bells?
I'm trying to think. I mean, if I'm trying to remember, one of the things that Chris had said was he had followed the rules and he had followed the process, and there was a feeling that things that were going on were unforward or slightly unfair. Is that?
I think that's
maybe
it. Yeah, I think that's what we're
and I guess
about.
I mean, I think I take a more practical and pragmatic view of the world. And, the example I give is maybe, right, we think we go before a judge for whatever issue one has, and we think the judge is some impartial arbiter of the law.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the Supreme Court right now, yes, they're all impartial, supposedly, or they are impartial arbiters, but behind these stoic judges are human beings, and human beings have their own, a human being, we're the sum of all our experiences. So now this can be called gerrymandering or whatnot. A big thing of what's occurred is we want to get a Supreme Court justice who maybe is a Catholic or has more of a right-leaning background on the bench, because then when they're looking at a thing such as abortion, maybe they will interpret it one way or another, and they might interpret it in a way that a conservative population might like better than, say, a more progressive or a liberal population. So I think maybe and I don't remember the conversation, but one of the things that's important to remember is everyone we deal with, we're all people.
Yeah.
And people everyone's smart, everyone cares, everyone's trying hard, but we all look at life through the lens of our experiences.
Yeah.
So perhaps, right, if I'm if my mom was a drug addict versus if my mom was a holistic practitioner that did functional medicine and used herbs or whatnot, or my mom was a religious, very devout religious person, I'm going to look at the concept of cannabis, regardless of what's presented to me, through a completely different perspective on that side.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that people often forget is, whether it's our legislators, whether it's our government officials, whether it's judges, whether it's lawyers or whatnot, they're still people. Mm-hmm. And people are people, and they come from where they come from, and our history and our personal relationships will change how we perceive something.
Yeah.
So, I think, on the Verano side, the reality here is many of these MSOs they employ a lot of people. They're successful people, and many successful people have relationships with political connections and everything on that side. So it's not surprising that perhaps someone's cousin or best friend or brother or whatnot maybe is employed or is a landlord of, or, the list goes on and on. And then if there is that relationship in place, when that person speaks, because they're quote unquote in the trusted circle,
Right.
it's human nature to kind of listen to that more intently and to understand and really kind of care more about their perspective than if some random person I'd never met in a suit comes to me and says, oh, well, these are the facts, so forth, and so forth.
So it sounds like maybe that was like a reference towards some of the political maneuvering we had witnessed leading up to that omnibus bill, which is like we saw the PR storm. It sounds like you were maybe referencing other conflicts of interest that exist.
Yeah,
within the
it
state of
definitely
Illinois.
was challenging, right? I think we had discussed this before.
Yeah.
And maybe when you go B-roll, you can go pull up some of the articles and some of the news things, but there was a very well orchestrated campaign where the same story, it was something where I think it was like 4 or 5 high school students basically went to a place and bought too much and had to go to the hospital, which is truly unfortunate, and that should be stopped. Yeah, I mean that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But that article was circulated and syndicated, and literally there were 4 or 5 versions of it that all came out all around the same time that the omnibus was in the final moves.
Yeah.
Now, what's fascinating, and again, now this becomes conjecture, were they really trying to ban hemp? They probably were. Or were they trying to create enough of a storm where craft growers couldn't get to their 14,000 square feet, or some of the other things in the omnibus bill that didn't happen? Because if you actually step back and look at the big picture, the MSOs got what they wanted.
Yeah.
So how could they have
Which is inaction and 280E, I just have to say, because keeping the things as they are benefits them.
So perhaps what they looked at it was, they were in a situation where it's heads I win, heads I win, tails you lose, right? So they're clearly not too thrilled about the hemp-derived cannabinoid industry because we represent competition.
Yeah.
Sure, they have vodka, and not everything we have is exactly vodka, but, we've got wine. And if you drink enough wine, you can get the same effect. And there's some people who are just tired and sick and tired of vodka, so maybe they want to go try some wine. Maybe a lighter feel or a more relaxing feel or a different feel, because that's just going to happen. And ultimately, some vodka sales, may drop. So, now as the dust has settled, I might look at this as, hey, this is the best move, right? Because if the omnibus bill passes, I wipe out an entire industry of competition. Or if the omnibus bill doesn't pass, I prevent other competition, craft growers from expanding. I think medical patients being able to buy from recreational dispensaries, this whole list, even allowing the transportation industry to get started, they'll just get delayed and it'll be status quo and life goes on. So if you look at it, it's actually it's pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
In terms of everything. I mean, they did good. They did well.
Yeah. I mean, when you want to talk about efficiency, what more efficient way than to set yourself up with 2 options that no matter what happens, you're good with.
And then, despite the whole thing going up in flames, they still found a way to pass what they really wanted.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I don't fault them. I mean, I actually respect them.
Yeah,
right?
And the logic they're going to use, by the way, with that 280E is that they're benefiting you too. When you get your license, then you'll be able to not have to pay into 280E. So they were looking out for you.
Yeah, well that's what they're saying.
Say.
But
right.
The reality is, you look at all the licenses that are out there and people who can get up and running. You actually have to be operational before you worry about taxes.
Right. Yeah.
And at this rate, no one else is going to be operational.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I know I asked you this time, last time, but it's weird to sit here right now to know that if if the omnibus bill would have passed and the Delta 8 crackdown did happen, you might not be sitting here.
It would definitely be a different world.
Yeah. The way I put it last time was they tried to make you into a criminal.
Yeah.
I mean, you've had time to think about that. Have you had any other thoughts come up with regard to that? Because again, it's crazy. That goes back to the point I led with limited licensing. They do view you as competition. What do we do with competition? Send our armed cronies after them.
I mean...
Get them off the street.
What's the term? All's fair in love and war?
Yeah.
So, I mean, end of the day, I guess, yeah. You just kind of have to laugh at it and stay at it. And, I mean, there is a reality that sans regulation, we have made calculated risks to get in the market and do things. And, I mean, this is... I don't want to bring up another industry, but, you know, right now there's been some recent headlines around cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, some of the biggest cryptocurrency companies in the U.S., they're getting sued by the Security and Exchange Commission for money laundering and fraud and all this. And, you know, I'm sure there's a side of, you know, I don't know. I know what's going on here, so we see the machinations, but maybe it's, you know, the big banks that are lobbying the SEC to put Ripple or Coinbase or some of these companies out of business.
Yeah.
On that side. And I mean, it's funny, you know, you talk about current events. There was just a recent judgment. Have you ever heard of Ripple, or do you know what Ripple is?
It's a crypto,
yeah,
right?
It's a cryptocurrency. Yeah. And basically a judge ruled that, like, it wasn't a win for either party, but the SEC's been going after Ripple because they're claiming Ripple is an unregistered security. And Ripple's entire thing is that we're a utility, we're a commodity. And then there's this whole thing where it's like, okay, well, Bitcoin's a commodity, but some of these other things might be securities or
Right.
We don't know. And the ruling came out where a certain segment of Ripple is a commodity and another segment of Ripple is a security. So they'll probably get fined in some way. But because that part is a commodity, I don't know if you call it a stock price, but the crypto price of Ripple basically doubled. And then some of these other exchanges like Coinbase, which was a fairly successful IPO from a couple years back, you know, Coinbase is like the E-Trade of cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
You know, 20 years ago, the idea of going online to buy stocks was kind of weird, and I'm sure E-Trade got sued a few times. You know, Coinbase is getting sued by the SEC for being a brokerage of unregistered securities, and now it says, well, hey, if Ripple isn't a security, maybe some of these other things on Coinbase isn't a security, and their stock price went up, you know, significantly also.
Yeah.
And it's all these sorts of things. I mean, you know, PayPal's another example. A lot of people don't realize this, but PayPal back in the day was money laundering.
Mm-hmm.
And they went in, built PayPal, knowing, I mean, they weren't breaking the law, but there was definitely probably a more liberal interpretation of the law, maybe in a similar way that, you know, hemp-derived cannabinoids are a more liberal interpretation of the Farm Bill.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, but you could even say the same thing. Heck, I mean, Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi actually, back in the day, was in unregulated and unlicensed frequencies run by the FCC. And everyone thought Wi-Fi would get banned. Maybe it'll interfere with air radar and all that. And, you know, and I know about this because I was actually in that industry.
Okay.
That's how I started my career as an entrepreneur. And now you fast forward 20 years later, these quote-unquote unlicensed or unregulated bands, some are actually regulated, and many of them are used for delivering, you know, public safety, delivering critical internet services, telemedicine services, health services, and everything to rural markets where, you know, plowing landlines up to a lonely house on top of a 5,000-foot mountain
Right.
just isn't practical because of cost or crossing rivers or things like that. So
Sure.
it's one of those things where if you look at just innovation and time and just life, every new industry has started in some sort of a gray area or a more liberal interpretation of the law. I mean, heck, I mean, I can go on and on. Like Square, for example.
Yeah.
You know, I happen to have spent some time in fintech. The original way of how credit card processing works is a bank it's like having a checking account. You know, the bank has to check the business out, has to do due diligence. You have to cross T's, dot I's. They have to run, you know, money laundering checks and everything like that. And what Square did was they were one of the first people that said, we're going to let someone get set up literally within minutes instead of taking the 1 week of underwriting that a bank and the 50 pages of stuff. And that was not legal back when Square started. But now what's happened is rules have been established saying, okay, well, yes, if you're a small business, because otherwise you had all these peddlers and, you know, small businesses who just couldn't take credit cards. And because of that, they couldn't really create businesses. They couldn't get going. You know, the mom working out of her backyard or the trunk, you know, the cottage industry now has been able to grow because of this stuff. And as a result, laws have been written to allow for these sorts of things. And then what happens is now as you become bigger, you hit a certain threshold, you know, you graduate from using Square to maybe a real credit card account or a real bank. Anyway, this trend is a common trend. It's not specific to cannabis.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? It's a common trend everywhere.
Yeah, that's pretty beautiful. I've never thought of it that way. And it perfectly, I feel, segues me to my next point. Maybe not, but I just read yesterday that, and I actually spoke to these people, Elevated Remedy, who put in a application. Are you familiar with them?
No.
They put in a application for yesterday's drawing.
Oh, the dispensary lottery.
Yep, the dispensary lottery. And they tweeted yesterday, well, the drawing was today, and we didn't win for the third time. We started this process in 2019 and have invested so much time and money here, it's just not going to happen here. And then they tweeted, this is interesting, we decided that we put too much time and money into this, so fuck a license, we're opening just like in New York. Discord link coming soon with address and information. Why should they always win and profit? What do you think about that idea of a person just opening up a retail storefront? And the reason I'm asking you is because we're kind of sitting in one right now.
I mean, what I would say is,
in other words, like what they're saying is not completely groundbreaking. Like these head shops are opening up and selling THCA flower, but like, yeah, what are your thoughts on that? It's pretty crazy to see them say like, hey, we put in for a license. JB Pritzker, they tagged him, and IDFPR. We didn't get that license, but we're going to proceed anyway and sell cannabis.
I mean, it tells me two things. First is license limits are not, you know, people are going to do what they're going to do. And it may be a challenging enforcement mechanism because it becomes whack-a-mole. Now, what I would recommend to, what were they called? Elevated Concepts?
Elevated Remedies.
Yeah, Elevated Remedies. And, you know, they're welcome, if you know them, or they're welcome to reach out to me.
Sure.
You know, what we sell here is not completely apples to apples to what's sold at a dispensary. Mm-hmm. Right? Imagine we're a liquor store and we don't have vodka.
Yeah.
We don't have vodka. Now, we have rum, we have wine, we have Everclear, we have Jack Daniels, you know, we have all the other things, but we do not have 100% of everything of what a dispensary has. And in fairness, a dispensary doesn't carry 100% of everything that we have, right? It's like if you go to a restaurant, sure, a Chinese restaurant and a Japanese restaurant both offer Asian food, but there's certain things that the Chinese restaurant has that the Japanese restaurant doesn't have, and the Japanese restaurant does that the Chinese restaurant doesn't have.
Right.
So what I would recommend to them is I would encourage them to look into this world of hemp-derived cannabinoids. And you may not be able to satisfy the vodka or the hardcore Delta-9, Delta-9 concentrate dab user.
Yeah.
But maybe with THCA or THCV or a 0.3% slushy or some sort of a concept on that side, there's other people, and then there's this whole world of kind of curious people that are interested, and you could look and be legal using hemp-derived cannabinoids to offer a similar experience, right? It's like, just because you can't be a certain type, like, just because you can't be a sushi restaurant because that's sushi. But even if you could be a sushi restaurant. Why would you open the exact same thing right next to someone else? Right? Like if you look at food, for example, there's the sushi place. Then there might be the Japanese taco concept. Maybe they use sushi concepts, maybe they don't, right? Then there might be the tempura fried chicken concept. Mm-hmm. Then there's the ramen concept. So yeah, they're all Japanese food, but they're not the same. And people shouldn't be so segmented thinking, hey, I'm going to get a dispensary license so I can open it. Because if you do that, you're going to sell the same thing that everyone else sells. Because there are no craft growers out there.
Right.
And you're still buying from the same 13 MSOs that actually own the 20 you know what I mean? It's the same old stuff. So take what I would say is, I mean, yes, you could do that and you could try to flaunt the rules. I would recommend against that, and I would say let's take a look at this hemp-derived cannabinoid world. There's an entire world that you can offer similar products, right? It's not exactly the same, but there's enough overlap that you can, and the thing is, people get bored. People don't want to drink or eat the same thing day in and day out. People like variety. Mm-hmm. So you can come in, you can expand the market, you can offer some innovation or entrepreneurism to that, make the world more interesting for everybody, and grow a nice little business or a big business, depending on where you want to go. Yeah. And help the industry grow.
What are your thoughts on them? They said one of the main ways, I encourage them to look into alternative cannabinoids or minor cannabinoids, however you want to say it. Hemp, farm bill legal cannabis. How about that? I encouraged them to look into it, and they were like, yeah, for sure. But what we're going to do is gifting. What do you think about that? Because it is, I've talked to several attorneys, and even on the state of Illinois' website for the longest time, they did say gifting is legal. They just recently removed it. I don't know why, and maybe it was a mistake, folks. You can see our episode on that. But the law says clearly that casual delivery is the punishment for casual delivery is possession of cannabis, and possession of 30 grams of cannabis is now legal. So what is your, have you talked to legal people about that?
About those parts,
sure.
Nor am I a lawyer. I would be concerned more about, sure, you're casually delivering, but you've got a depot that, okay, you come down to 30 grams each, but if you're going to serve 100 customers in a day, that's 100 times 30, which becomes, what is that, 3,000 grams?
Yeah.
And 3,000 grams at about, call it 450, so 500 grams a pound. You got 6 pounds a day you're going out, and it's my understanding that holding 6 pounds of cannabis is against the law.
Very illegal.
So
I was looking up the penalty, actually.
I don't know, because
more than 2,000, between 2,000 and 5,000 grams, which I think is, you said 3,000 grams, is a felony, 3 to 7 years in prison, maximum fines of $2,500.
Yeah, so
25,000, I meant to say, not 2,500.
So I mean, that's a little too risky for me.
Yeah.
To do. I mean, you've remarked about THCA flower or something like that. I mean, that's legally hemp. And
it's like what they sell at the dispensaries. Like most of the flour is THCA flour. If you look at it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to just check the COA, and many of them though have Delta-9 levels above 0.3%. Yeah. So that makes them marijuana.
I guess, yeah.
And everything on that side, and it's just what the law is. But one can offer similar products.
Yeah.
Without breaking the law. So why break the law?
But I was wondering. I just had this thought. There's the. And I'm not trying to call out names to get anybody in trouble. I love what these people do, but there's the Sesh Bus, there's Phil at High Minded Events, and they all do gifting. And I've always wondered, how do they get, because like you just said, they've explained in an old Grown In article that I found that they would have their employees go and purchase their legal limit. But like you said, when it all comes back to the bus or when it all comes back to the event, who's in possession of that cannabis? But they're doing it.
I mean, again, I don't know, and
right, and I didn't expect answers today.
Yeah,
totally.
I don't have the. I mean, there's definitely ways to get away with it, I'm sure.
Sure.
And I mean, it's no different than, the legacy market is still thriving and strong, right?
Yeah.
Is Illinois like a $4.5 or $5 billion market? like gross.
Yeah.
But legal is only 1.6 or 1.8, which
Yeah.
means legacy is the other half, and that means legacy's bigger, right? Because
Yes.
4.5 minus 1.6 is more than 1.6. It's like 2.5 or.
Yeah, and I always like to bring up when people bring up the 1.6 number, because people will say Illinois is doing things differently because we don't want to be like Michigan. Illinois in 2022 got like 1.6 or 1.7 billion in revenue. Michigan got 2.8.
Okay, well that's good, right?
Better than us.
Yeah. I mean, they've got more, so.
I just wanted to point it out there because a lot of people point to Michigan as a failure. They're like, well, they gave up too many licenses and everything failed over there. It's like, but if they're still bringing in more money than us, did they fail?
Well, there is a reality that I think a lot of people don't recognize this, that cannabis businesses are really hard to operate. You know, you've got a lot stacked against you in terms of the financial aspects and the legal and regulatory sides of the equation, and then the federal 280E. You know, I mean, like, the list kind of goes on and on and on
stacks.
and on. And there's definitely, I mean, on our side, we have not aggressively pursued being a regulated cannabis business, and we have found that we'd rather stay on the outskirts with hemp-derived cannabinoids and these minors because the regulatory cost just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
In terms of it's just not practical. And the reality here, though, is you have to recognize that a lot of these cannabis businesses are not built to be businesses. They're built on the assumption that they're going to be bought in the future.
Yes.
Right? So it's a stock play.
Yep.
And you got to look at this where, you know, if I'm a hedge fund with $100 billion under management, and then I look at my asset allocation, you know, $1 billion or $2 billion goes to Cresco or to fund Curaleaf or whatever, right? So they're my upside play. And what these guys do is they don't just fund one. Like, the 5 hedge funds with $100 billion probably have gotten together and they say, okay, well, we're each going to put $1 billion into cannabis.
Yeah.
So we're going to pick the 5 winners: Cresco, Curaleaf, GTI. And again, this is pure conjecture, right?
Yeah.
You know, and then we'll each put $200 million in all of them, and of those 5, 1 or 2 of them will make it, and then they'll get bought out by Constellation Brands or some massive CPG, and they'll be worth, you know, if it's $1 billion that we're putting in, they'll get bought out for $50 billion or some crazy number, and you know, that's a risk we're willing to take because we, you know, the one winner will pay for the 4 losers that we have. So the reality is everyone's competing against them. And when you're competing against someone who doesn't have to make money,
right, not in it for the long
because
haul.
they keep selling stock to investors, or their investors are looking at more of a long-range type of a target, you got to be realistic. And I don't want to make it sound like you can't be innovative or anything on that side. You can, but it's really hard if you think about this, right? We all have the same costs as businesses, right? You got to pay people what you got to pay people. You got your cost of production. You all have the same cost. You all have this. Now, if somebody can sell something for, let's say it costs you $100 and it costs me $100, if you can sell it for $50 because someone doesn't care because you've got an investor willing to subsidize you, but I have to, if it costs me $100, I got to at least sell for 100, if not higher. The consumer's going to buy from you.
Yeah.
Because the price is cheaper.
Right.
And you don't make your money in the same way that I do, so I'm going to have problems to play with. And that's one of those things. It always blows my mind. You know, I talk to a lot of these people, and they're like, and I still don't understand how a social equity cannabis business model works, because it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And everyone I talk to, they say, yeah, it's going to be really hard. So I'm like, well, do you have an answer? It's like, no, it's going to be really hard, but we're going to try really hard. And that just seems to me, it's like, it just seems to be poor thinking.
Yeah, I agree.
Or
I was
planning.
gonna bring this up. Like, I read an article. I think it was written 2 days ago by Green Market Report. I think the headline is "Tough Times Likely Ahead for New Illinois Marijuana Shops." If people are wanting to look it up, I'll try to put it in B-roll. They described how estimates from a Chicago-based cannabis consultant showed that opening up a shop, just a retail shop, could cost between $650,000 and $1.5 million. And then the sentence after that said, and true social equity candidates are unlikely to have those finances. Is that what you meant by, like, you've always just found it confusing, like, how's this going to work? Because if I could just quickly, I had in my mind, and even Elevated Remedies described it the other day. They had it in their mind that when they pitched this social equity thing, it was like, I had the idea that, like, maybe my pot dealer would have a chance, like, you know, because he was affected by the war on drugs. Yeah, he didn't have as much money as everybody else does, but he was affected, and I was under the impression he would have a good chance of, like, winning. But, like, no. Why would I ever expect somebody like you have to be financially literate, you have to have investors lined up. Like, I don't think this was ever actually about giving the pot dealer, you know, a chance. Is that what you found confusing about it, or was it something else?
It's not about that. It's just people didn't think things through. So what you're dealing with, the reason why you can't fundraise. Oh, hold on, we'll stop for a second. Okay, so let's get back. Where were we at?
You were
social
saying,
equity.
Yeah.
The reality here is a regulated dispensary is like a grocery store. It is a packaged product play with a very limited consumer experience outside of maybe different color walls, artwork, or a couch. That's literally, that's the world of regulated cannabis.
At least in Illinois.
In Illinois today.
Yep.
So if that's the place, what you have, and then, you know what, a lot of people say, I mean, these people say, oh, the MSOs suck. I mean, they don't suck, because you got people who are working hard. You look at their Google or Yelp reviews, they all have, you know, 4.5 stars or whatever. So, like, they're doing a decent job. And, you know, they're servicing a market. Sure, there could be slight levels of improvements, but, like, that's the reality.
Yeah.
So you got to understand consumer behavior and how people are. I mean, it's human nature. We are creatures of habit.
Yeah.
So let me ask you some questions. Do you buy groceries?
Yes.
Okay. What grocery store do you go to?
Like Schnucks or Meyer.
Okay. Schnucks. How long have you been going to that grocery store?
Over 5 years.
5 years. And when you walk in the grocery store, you now have a lay of the grocery store. So, like, produce is one side,
Yep.
meats are here, prepackaged are here, bread's here, drinks here, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And you just kind of mindlessly go through your routine and pick your stuff up.
Yep.
Now, in your area, has another grocery store opened in the last 5 years?
I think yes.
Have you even bothered to think about it or check it out?
No.
Why not?
Because it's what I have is familiar. And in fact, when I go to other towns, maybe to make your point, I'll look for a Schnucks, because then I'm not like, where the fuck am I at? You know?
It's tough. It's scary.
Yeah.
So really, that's the cannabis dispensary business. So if you're opening up a dispensary, everyone's got their Schnucks equivalent, right? They've got their routine. Maybe, you know, the person says, okay, I go pick up my stuff on Thursday afternoon because their job means, you know, the kids have extracurriculars. So the shopper stops at Target to go get whatever paper towels or odds and ends they need. Then they go to Mariano's or Kroger's or whatever the Schnucks equivalent is. They go pick up their stuff. And then maybe they have like a nice little bakery they like. So they go and get some muffins or fresh baked goods. Then they go to CVS to pick up whatever, like, medications or random things. And they go to the dispensary to go pick up their joint or their weed or like, this is built into the consumer.
Right.
So that population is there. And the dispensary, the MSO is not just going to roll over and say, oh, you just opened up? Well, why don't you have all my customers? They have loyalty programs. They market. They have bud tenders who have incentives and bonus programs and things in place. They offer good service to their customers. You know, like, they're trying to do a good job because everyone at their job wants to do they're doing all these sorts of things. So now if you open up as a new dispensary, what incentive does someone have to go check your thing out and give up all their loyalty points, their discounts, their guy they like, blah, blah, blah. And when they go to the place, they're still buying the same product because the dispensary is still buying from the MSO.
Right.
Oh, because then you say, okay, well, I'm going to be a craft grower, and I'll make something so amazing and different that no one's going to want it, but that's still not going to work, because if your product is that amazing, the large dispensaries that have all the traffic will just pick it up, and it'll be more efficient for you to do that than it would be to have your exclusive product at your vertically integrated dispensary to get people to come over. Do you see what I mean? It's that. So the reality is, sure, it's $500,000 to $1.5 million to open, but you need a marketing budget.
Yeah.
You need an operational budget. You're going to lose money. It's like the restaurant business.
Yeah.
And restaurants lose money for their first 2 years before they get going.
Yeah.
And then they have to have like a fun and exciting and different concept. So if it's a restaurant with the same concept, it's going to lose money for quite some time. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So now what you need is $3 to $4 million to do this and find out that it's not going to work. And the problem you have here is, outside of what they call like friends and family, most investors are kind of smart, because you don't become an investor with millions, tens of millions, or 100 millions to invest if you're if you don't have a set of brains in your head, because what do they say, fool and their money are parted. So they know this, and they look at this and say, this doesn't make sense. So really what happens is, if you're a dispensary, then what you're doing is you're competing in what I call the 7% market. And what I call the 7% market means 7% of the U.S. population moves every year. Because the reality is, the average person lives in a place for 8 years.
Yeah.
Now, some people live longer, some people live shorter. So you've got 7% of your population moving, and only when you move, like, how did you find Schnucks? You moved to a place and you were in unfamiliar territory.
Yeah.
When will you look again for a new grocery store? Really be on the lookout. Is maybe you move to East St. Louis, maybe you move to Chicago, maybe you move to New York. Then your slate's clean, and now you got to go find where everyone is.
Right.
And you're now competing on that market. So now if you look at, 7% of the population, and then of the population that moves, or just the general population, only 10 or 15% actually consume cannabis on a regular basis.
And I wonder, this probably makes it even more complicated, but what faction of those people are coming from a market where maybe some of these brands already exist, if that would play into it?
So they might have an affinity, right? So
sure.
If I move, I've got a Curaleaf affinity.
Right.
So then I go here, and then I still have my Curaleaf points and stuff. So I'm going to give Curaleaf a shot, because I've been buying from Curaleaf for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And all my loyalty points are the people I know or the products I know. Right? You're right. Because if you move and you're familiar with going to Schnucks, and you go somewhere else and there is a Schnucks,
are you
going to go check that place out, or are you going to go to like some unknown grocery store you've never heard of?
Yeah, I never thought about the 7% thing, though. That's interesting.
No, that's the actual market.
Yeah.
So the only thing that gets someone to switch is if somebody comes up. It's like restaurants are the same thing, right? What's your favorite type of food? Pizza. And in your particular locale, you've got probably your pizza place.
Yes.
Do you ever think of any other pizza place out of your routine in your locale?
I have pizza places, but yeah, I'm very, like, when people bring up new ones, I'm like, I don't know.
You think about
these are my trusty ones.
Yeah, you got your trusty. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So then the only thing that'll get you something new is all of a sudden if you heard that, like, I don't know, Mexican taco or Mexican wraps. It's a new thing, and it's like, it's not pizza.
Right.
It's Mexican tacos, or I don't know, Korean tacos, or Ethiopian food, or Indian satay. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, I got my pizza place. I'm used to my pizza place, but I've actually never heard of I don't have an Indian, non-satay place.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's a real food, right?
Yeah.
And you know what? I'll go check that place out because it's new and everyone's raving about it. Or do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the reality of life and how people are in humans. I mean, the other example I always give, credit cards. How long have you had your credit card for?
Well, 7 years probably.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And you've got some Visa or a MasterCard that you've been using, and I'm sure you get so much mail about like the newest credit card that's got so many more points.
But I'm just fuck this.
Screw it, right?
Sometimes, but you're right. Maybe a situation comes up and it's like, this one has air travel points. It's like, well, I am taking that flight soon. But it's very rare.
It's very rare. And then think of all the times you think about it, but how often do you actually follow through?
Correct.
And change.
Yeah.
This is just a human nature problem that a lot of people don't fully, well, not a lot of people, many of these, whether it's social equity or new business people, they just don't understand it because they just haven't been in business before. And then this becomes, well, this is why there's the MSO benefit or whatnot, because a lot of these MSOs, they started from people who were in business before.
Yeah.
So that's the value of being in privilege, right? Because like, oh, I think like the Verano guy was like he was like a big restaurateur, right? Or the Cresco people were like mortgage people. You see what I mean? So like they didn't just come from nowhere.
I actually just saw a trash can that I think was related to the Verano people. Maybe I've got my names wrong. David Flood Brothers. They were involved in cannabis. Maybe it's not Verano.
Maybe I don't know.
But yeah,
I've heard of that.
It's funny though. I like look next to my car and I see a trash can, Flood Brothers, and I think cannabis.
No, I mean, but like you see, these people have.
Yep.
They know that stuff. They just understand that stuff, and yeah.
I wanted to take a moment to clarify what I was referring to in this segment. First of all, I'll show you the photo because I took a photo. Here's the trash can that I saw that made me think cannabis, Flood Brothers. Now, why did this make me think cannabis? Is it because cannabis is trash in Illinois? Maybe. No, I'm just joking. No, the reason that I thought cannabis when I saw the name Flood Brothers is because of my research into the way that cannabis policy has been shaped in Illinois. If you'd like to see some of this research, we have episode number 232, which has a document that is in the episode description. It's got citations for everything that I say. I'm currently working on version 2 of this document, which will include some of the things that I'm about to talk about. In March of 2021, I believe March 10th of 2021, the Chicago Sun-Times shared a news story that Jeff Cox, who was working as the Illinois Department of Agriculture's chief cannabis regulator from 2016 until I think June of 2020, began consulting for a group, NMI Management Group, which was a consultancy led by Leonard Mahler and David Flood, who is a businessman tied to Consume dispensary chain. So if you've seen the Consume dispensaries, I believe that's tied to David Flood, and PTS, Progressive Treatment Solutions, the Cultivation Center in East St. Louis. Cox was still heading the Agriculture's department's pot section when PTS and the state's other cultivators were awarded new licenses to grow recreational marijuana. I'm actually reading from the article in the Chicago Sun-Times. If you're wondering, I will display it right now. Flood also served until 2019 as the treasurer and principal officer of the influential and deep-pocketed Medical Cannabis Alliance of Illinois, which is now known as the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois. The companies he's aligned with have become huge campaign donors, dishing out a combined $139,000 in contributions, $5,000 of which went to Representative Kelly Cassidy. Here's where Verano comes in. Records show George Archos, the chief executive of the massive Chicago-based pot firm Verano Holdings, was also an officer of NMI Management. However, Archos is no longer listed in the company's state filing. So that is one of the clearest connections I've seen of David Flood to PTS and Verano. And so I just wanted to provide a little bit more information of where I was coming from with regard to that comment. If you'd like to read more, once again, that was a report on March 10th, 2021 by the Chicago Sun-Times. Author Tom Schuba, who has been on the podcast in the past, headline, States ex-pot regulators, polls are cashing in on the exploding industry. A proposed crackdown won't stop all of them. I'm displaying the headline right now in case my reading it was not clear or you weren't able to understand what I was saying. So there's the headline if you'd like to look it up. That's the story. And back to your point of, maybe this makes your point, maybe not, just correct me if I'm wrong, but when you ask, it didn't make sense, and like what else? I felt like you're asking like what else did we expect? When you look at the people that have open doors and the fact that they are either MSOs like Starbuds or whatever, or just very well connected people, like should we be surprised with how this was set up?
Really, what the issue was is the if when legalization first happened in January of 2020, there were lots of dead zones. Because at the time, there were only, 55 medical dispensaries and everything on that side. Then, over the past 2 years, another 55 were established. So many of the dead zones got filled in, and then relocation was allowed. So people moved from less than ideal places to more ideal places. And if you had a 2-year window where you can find the 110 choicest locations, that's a huge leg up.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that there aren't any there aren't any of those locations left. So if you look at of the new dispensaries, a few of them have opened and have been moderately successful because they found a dead zone, right? If you've been driving 50 miles or 40 miles to get to a dispensary,
yes,
you will switch because no one wants to drive 40 miles if you can only drive 10 miles.
Right.
Right? That's a constant thing. So those people are looking. But what I'm saying is, and I don't know if we talked or I've talked about this. I remember having this conversation with someone back in 2020 or 2021. I said there's probably about 15 to 20 of these dead zones left in the state where if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
And that was a year and a half ago.
And do you think they're filled
back
up?
When there were only 50 or 60. And now with 120, they're probably mostly all taken up.
Yeah.
And then some have gone away. All those people along the Missouri border,
right,
their businesses evaporated overnight.
Yeah.
Once Missouri allowed for legal rec, right?
Yeah, and I wouldn't even be surprised if some of the dispensaries in Illinois saw their sales go down because...
Oh, they tanked. It was... I think, I don't know if it's Ascend or someone else. They have a dispensary in, East St. Louis that was the number one grossing dispensary across the entire state because everyone from St. Louis kept coming over.
Yeah, you could see the sign from the arch, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So it's oh, there's weed.
And literally when rec came over and legalized in St. Louis, because the St. Louis taxes are significantly lower than Illinois, so, your eighth in Illinois is $70 all said and done, and over there an eighth was 45 or 50 all said and done. Everyone went over there, and then the joke was haha, you Illinoisans we're getting your cigarette business, your gas business, and your alcohol business. Now we got your weed business.
Yeah. Fuckers.
And the Missourians were happy as a clam.
Yeah.
So,
crazy.
Those are the realities of all this sort of stuff.
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of add this story to the podcast. It was recently reported on August 18th, 2023. Again, this interview that you're watching was originally recorded on July 14th, 2023. So this was reported a month after, but I feel like it kind of backs up what Charles is saying. So I wanted to share this news story. The headline is, Metro East dispensary sees drastic decrease after Missouri legalizes weed sales. Beyond Hello was once the go-to dispensary for St. Louis without a med card. I don't know if that's how you say that. St. Louisians? I feel like that's Louisiana. I don't know. That's a weird St. Louis. Never seen that written before. Two things come to mind when St. Louis think of Sauget, Illinois: weed and nightclubs, apparently. The small village directly across the river is the land of smokestacks, strip joints, and minor league baseball with a population of just a few hundred people. It's the unofficial playground of St. Louis, and before Missouri legalized recreational marijuana, Sauget was the unofficial destination for quality dispensary weed. That's funny. But no more. Now Missourians can buy weed in their home state where taxes on the product are much lower. We spoke to, and I'm reading this article from RFT Riverfront Times. They spoke to Trent Wolowczyk, the chief strategy director for Jushi, Beyond Hello's parent company, about how things have changed for Beyond Hello's 2 dispensaries in Sauget 2 near the river, and Goose Lake further south since adult use sales began earlier this year. I'll stop reading after this because you can take a look at this yourself if you'd like, but I wanted to read this point. Have you noticed a difference in sales since Missouri began legal recreational marijuana sales in February? Answer: we actually saw a pretty drastic decrease in our sales from pretty much the onset. They say the good news is we've been able to work with our vendors and partners in the state to break down pricing and keep products in stock and diversify our shelves. And I wanted to read one more question here. How drastic was the sales hit? Can you put it into numbers? We're a publicly traded company, so we don't report on a store-to-store basis. But overall, we saw a 30% to 40% decrease in our revenues. Wow. So, to Charles' point, I wanted to share that story. Again, if you'd like to look it up, the headline by the Riverfront Times is Metro East Dispensary sees drastic decrease after Missouri legalizes weed sales. Enjoy the rest of the episode. Well, hey, just to wrap up, do you have anything that we didn't talk about today that you felt you wanted to mention?
I mean, we're just chatting, and
sure,
as long as you keep asking questions, I can keep talking.
Cool.
You'll probably need to edit this thing down.
No, I like to keep it all fresh.
We've talked a lot.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's not the same cannabis market as it was 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. What do you think your outlook is for the future with just getting through a crackdown? I don't see that issue going away.
Sorry, which crackdown?
The cannabinoid crackdown that they tried to do in this last omnibus. I'm asking you a multifaceted question, so my apologies, but how do you feel about the future, keeping in mind what just happened, and also just, what I've told you today with people just saying, fuck it, we're going to open. How do you feel about the future?
Well, I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic. One of the things that I'm very open and willing to do is I want more of these cannabis licensees who couldn't get in to learn the path I'm going. Again, maybe this is, you say I have an abundance mindset. But there's also a practical reality. If it's just me against the MSOs, I mean, I'm just some dude. They've got billions. I will die. If I can get more of these, call it people that didn't make the dispensary business, we can help small businesses get in the business, people, social equity that got blocked out because for whatever reason they didn't have the insider connections or the millions of dollars to get up and running. I would like to get them into our business, into the cannabis or the hemp-derived cannabinoid business, and in the industry to grow the industry it's going to help them, but there's also a selfish reason. Because if by next year, you said the elevated solutions or whatnot, I'm sure for one of those people who are as crazy to put a target on their back, there's probably 20 others who probably would have moved forward had they won a license. Well, if they see this as an alternative way and they're all in business and they're going to follow good practices because they would have done it anyways to be a dispensary, and then they can actually build businesses, build wealth for themselves, create jobs for the communities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all these positive things that ultimately create positive economic impacts for everybody.
Yeah.
That'll actually help my position, because then it's not just, it's Charles and Glenn and a few, call it weirdos, or people that fell off the edge. It's now mainstream is recognizing this is an option. And I mean, in many ways, even amongst the MSO community, there are what's called second-tier MSOs who are getting blocked out by the Crescos and the Curaleaf, and they should be looking at, hemp-derived cannabinoids. I mean, think about this, right? If there was Budweiser and Miller, I don't know alcohol, and you were number 4, why wouldn't you get into seltzers? Mm-hmm. Or, Budweiser's going to try to ban seltzers, right? Why wouldn't you do a hard lemonade or a seltzer? Because that's going to help you get market share from a different angle. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
We should let... I like innovation and competition because it lets other entrants come in, and I want other people to get in the industry because it's going to make us all better. Yeah.
Do you think it's inevitable, maybe this is our last question, do you think it's inevitable that some of these limitations I complain about, I don't want to say we're complaining about, because I don't mean to loop you in with how I feel about limited licenses, but do you think it's inevitable that these things go away, and what does it take? Because these companies refer to it as a regulatory moat around their business. That literally, on quote, that's what Ben Kovler said. This is a regulatory moat.
I don't think you're going to change
out.
the number of dispensary or Delta 9 licenses out there. I think what you're going to do is you're going to expand the market, right? So maybe it's one level of expansion is hemp-derived cannabinoids. Another one could be some other thing that we haven't even discovered that's going to come out and offer another effect.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a psilocybin. Do you see what I mean? It's ultimately what we're talking about here is it's not a market of intoxicating cannabis. It's a market of plant-based remedies and therapies that offer a variety of effects.
Yeah.
And just like how, there's enough vodka licenses out there, and the vodka guys have such a stranglehold on that, but people will want to try rum, they'll want to try whiskey, they'll want to try a seltzer, they'll want to try wine. The list goes on, and the world hopefully will continue expanding, and then we'll have more consumer options, consumer choice, and many of the things that you're aiming for as a consumer to get more fun and excitement is going to happen, right? I mean, do we need another, there's a sushi restaurant in every corner now.
Yeah.
Do we need another sushi restaurant? Probably not, but maybe there's other Japanese-inspired or Asian-inspired cuisines or fusions that we can go try. Like nowadays I see Vietnamese coffee is the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what is it? But apparently it's kind of cool and different, and it's not sushi.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So there is the Vietnamese coffee or the, Korean taco or the Indian wrap or, me being Asian, I just happen to know Asian food a little better. There are all those options out there too that I'm hoping will occur and expand the industry and make things more fun and exciting and let creativity, make us all better people.
And I definitely am looking forward to those types of things, but like I said earlier, really my focus is I feel like if we were sitting here right here in 1979 with Tommy Chong, if he was sitting right here and we'd be like, hey dude, we're from the future. I know that's pretty trippy, but hear me out. In the future, cannabis is going to be legal, so you won't have to worry about that touring, but make sure you don't have too much on you and make sure you buy it from the right place. I feel like he would just be like, and I use him as an example because people use him to say he brought cannabis to the forefront and we could thank him for the progress we've made because he took the risk so far long ago. So if we explained it to somebody like that, this is what it's like, this is what you wanted, right? I feel like they'd be like, nah dude, I just wanted to not worry about going to jail for this shit. I don't even necessarily want a store to go to. I just don't want to have to go to jail. And I wonder, my question is so we've obviously lost sight of that. How do we get, I know this is a big question, but how do we get the industry to bring that back into the forefront? We're doing this wrong.
So my counter would be Tommy Chong has a CBD brand. He also has a Delta 8 brand.
Yeah.
And he's been looking at this more of expansive versus trying to be narrow-minded and trying to fix what's been fixed.
Yeah.
And you can say the same about Jim Belushi.
Mm-hmm.
He does hemp, and he's doing hemp-derived in addition to, his actual cannabis stuff.
Yeah.
That would be my answer.
Yeah, and I've asked him himself, and he basically said the same.
It's more expansion than it is to try to fix what's happened, because the problem here is, you have people who've put a lot into it, and they're not just going to let it go.
Right.
Think of it like taxi medallions.
Yeah.
You got your taxi
exactly
medallions. Those taxi medallion people are holding on to it, and they ain't gonna let more taxi medallions in.
Yeah.
So you expand the market with Uber. You expand the market with Lyft. You get divvies out there. You get other forms of transportation. You get subways. You get better metro rails, or all these. You get these car sharing programs,
mm-hmm.
and things like that to solve for things.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of thinking about it, and it goes back to some of the analogies you made earlier in our conversation, where it's just because this happens here doesn't mean that that's what it's got to be. No. You can evolve and take other paths. So
hopefully, yeah.
It is interesting, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say it does sound depressing that you're just well, basically that, I agree with you. I want to be clear. I'm not like debating you right now. Like, why would they give it up? Well, you've got a table with a lot of money on it or a table with less money on it. You're going to pick the table with more money on it. In other words, why would you give up your taxi medallion, right?
Yeah, well, it's not just that. It's either they give it up or competition comes in. But again, if I'm a competitor, I got to go like charge a deep moat that's been built up. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's just much greener pastures for me to go against.
Instead of getting bogged down in the moat.
For me to set up, I mean, again, this goes back to everyone's like, oh, we'll beat the MSOs because they suck. They don't suck. Cresco has smart people that work for them. GTI has smart people that work for them. Cureleaf has smart people that work for them. How am I going to beat someone who's got capital, who's got resources, who's got experience at their game? What do I have that's so amazing and special? We're buying from the same vendors. We're, like our inputs are all the same.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
And if I have some new vendor who I'm willing to take a chance on, the minute I get any proof, they're going to go sell the same thing to Cureleaf anyways.
Yeah.
So I'm screwed. I mean, I might have a 6-month temporary advantage, but it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'm excited because I'm going to be able to sleep soundly tonight, not only because of maybe the products I'm about to consume, but because I bought it from somebody that I feel I don't have like a moral confliction. Like look, I like to say this to people. I am not holier than thou. I do go to Illinois dispensaries sometimes when I need to. Let me give you an example. Sometimes I'd like to get a cartridge and I just don't have anybody that I can trust to purchase off of. Yeah. But a dispensary, and it fucking sucks. Like, not only do I have to pay that price tag, but also to know that I'm potentially contributing to those companies' lobbying campaigns. Like, that doesn't sit well with me. So I wanted to say that for my audience that wonder, like, I hope I haven't given off the impression that I'm, like, holier than thou. I go to...
You sold out.
Yeah. No, I go to Illinois dispensaries
sometimes.
You're
just a normal person.
Yes.
We are all human beings.
Yeah.
And we're going to do what's best for us.
Yeah. So I that was meant to be a compliment, but I ended up getting long-winded.
I appreciate it.
Cool. Well, hey, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Let's go have some fun here in Chitiva. So,
yeah.
Folks, we said where Chitiva's at the beginning of the show. Go to your local Chitiva. Enjoy the tasty stuff they have. I think I'm going to get some flour and a few different snacks, so I'm really excited. I'll share what I get after this episode ends. Take care, everybody.
Great.
See you, Charles.
Thanks a lot.
Yep. As promised, I am back to tell you about the products that I tried at Chitiva, and I just thought I'd share a little bit about my general experience. So, as I told you at the beginning of this episode, I got several samples of the THCA flower. I got the ZA, and I got the B4. I also got a pre-roll, but I'm not sure what it was. But it smoked pretty good. And I just smoked it going down the street in Chicago because it's hemp and you can smoke cigarettes and it's a hemp product, right? I also got one of these shots that they have. The camera is not showing it very well, but it says Chitiva Indica Shot, cherry chill in a bottle. 50 milligrams of it's a THC infused product, 50 milligrams apparently per bottle. I was told to mix this in like a soda because it's like a sweeter mix. So probably like a Sprite or something. This is kind of like a syrup. So kind of interesting. 50 milligrams. And this is very similar, like I've been saying, to something you could find in a dispensary. 50 milligrams of THC in this little shooter. I also tried, as you saw during the episode when he mentioned the muffin sampling, I tried some of their baked goods, and they were very tasty. There was this one called like Morning Delight or something like that, and it had pineapple and something else in it. It reminded me a lot of zucchini bread, which is why I loved it. I'm a huge fan of zucchini bread. So it was really good. They also gave me one gummy, which I gave to one of my friends who has a lower tolerance than me, because the gummy was like 30 milligrams or 20 milligrams or something like that. You know, it was a pretty good dose for a normal person. And that's why I wanted to give it to a normal person. And they told me, yeah, it felt like just an edible that they would buy from the dispensary. And that segues me into talking, I guess, about my experience there. I thought it was really cool to walk into this boutique shop. You know, I got ID'd as if I was walking into a bar, but past that, it was like, yeah, kind of like a bar, any other establishment that I've been in. And it's the most normalized environment with cannabis I'd say that I've been in Illinois, setting aside consumption lounges that I've visited at this point. You know, this was it was cool to be sitting there speaking to Charles, and in the background I could hear a person at the counter saying, "Oh yeah, get me 4 gummies and a pre-roll, and yeah, you know, actually I would like a muffin before I go, since you've got a deal that if I get this I can get that for a discounted price." It was weird to hear that because it sounded like I was in a dispensary. It was cool to hear that. I don't mean to say weird. It was just like to hear that and to know that some people make it like a regular stop. That's at least what it sounded like when I heard some transactions, as if they were pretty familiar with what they wanted and what they enjoyed. There were some people that were like, "Hey, what do you have?" And they got a rainbow flight like I did. So they were sampling things, you know, trying to figure out what they wanted to buy a bigger quantity of, you know. But for the most part, I heard people that seemed to frequent Chitiva, and I thought that was pretty cool. Maybe that was just, you know, my anecdotal experience. Charles did mention to me either during the podcast or afterwards that it's kind of an even mix of regulars and new people, if I'm recalling what he told me correctly. So I wanted to say that just in case my anecdotal experience wasn't completely true. In other words, you know, if it's not just people frequenting, you know, maybe it is just people like, hey, because the sign out front catches your eye, as I displayed in the front of the episode. It's like, come in, get a slushy and get high, or something to that effect. Let me see what it says. Um, but yeah, you know, I um had a really good time, and I really enjoyed the products. And the sign says, "Don't be shy, come get high. Infused slushies for free." I mean, how are you not going to, and it's got weed leaves on the sign. How are you not going to go into that store when you walk by it? I mean, come on. And it's just very interesting that this is a thing, and it's a thing that you don't see a lot of. You know, you certainly see these products on sale at, you know, your local head shops and gas stations, you name it. But you don't see, you know, like literally when I was in the area and searched up dispensary, a few of the results that I got were like, I think it was either the Green Rose slash Ivy Hall, maybe both. The point I'm trying to make is I Googled dispensary, you know, Google Maps, and the results I saw were two what you would call legal dispensaries and Chitiva. So I don't know, you know, if Google has Chitiva categorized as a dispensary, but for all intents and purposes, it looks and feels like a dispensary, which is awesome. And I think more people should be operating under this business model. It's completely legal. It's not a loophole by any means. It really feels like one, I will acknowledge, you know, but it's not. It's all by the color of the law. And in fact, you know, some of the complications I've heard from business owners like this, or people that make products like these, is trying to remain in that box, you know? So one thing I asked was like, why am I not seeing cartridges on sale at some of these locations? And I was told that they're working on it. But the issue is, you know, you have a cartridge like this, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, like a vape cartridge. Why did I not see any of those at Chitiva or some of these other places? And I've been told that they're working on this. You know, some of the people I've spoken to have told me we're working on that, but The issue is you can make it, and when you have the cartridge fresh, it complies with the law. But let's say it sits on the shelf for a month or two, and then you retest. What they find is that it's over that 0.3% threshold, and it's a funny case where the product became illegal sitting on the shelf. It reminds me of, I don't know like if this is true or not. I can Google this right now, but I heard that during the prohibition days that they would say something to the like they would have something in the label like, I don't even know how I would Google this. Something like, this is grape juice. Don't like keep it for too long because then it's going to ferment and turn into wine. Wink, wink. In other words, people would read that and be like, wait, this is going to turn into wine? I'm going to do exactly what this says not to do, and I'm going to keep it so that it turns into wine. Again, I might be getting the details wrong, and I might have been told something that's completely incorrect. Literally, this information I'm telling you is from like, I swear to God, my junior high days. I don't even know if that's accurate. So look this shit up yourself. My point is, it's crazy to think about. You put a product on a shelf, and for a few days, or maybe a few months, or maybe a month, I don't know, for some arbitrary amount of time, it's legal in air quotes. But after that arbitrary amount of time, and after it passes that arbitrary threshold, what's basically happening, folks, is maybe a cartridge is sitting on the shelf and sunlight shines directly on it throughout the day. Well, that could decarboxylate the concentrate that's in the cartridge, causing those THC levels to exceed 0.3. In other words, the THCA will have converted to THC via that decarboxylation process. Now, I'm no scientist. Look this up yourself, folks. But this is what I was told from business owners. Another, like I say, remarkable case of like what a fine line you have to. It's an interesting song and dance, and it all makes my point even more clearly. That it is the same thing, right? When you think about that example I just gave with the vape cartridge, if they can't figure out how to make it, because technically what they're making is products that aren't legal under the Farm Bill, what does that tell you about all these products? Like if they have to like keep them in check, what I'm trying to say is they are the exact same thing. They are. And I mean, when it comes down to brass tacks, they literally are. It's all cannabis. And that kind of goes back to the whole thing that I started with, which is that hemp is such an arbitrary definition, and scientists, I would like to think, cringe at this, because the way I understand it is that cannabis is known as cannabis because that is the plant's genus. So if you guys know anything about biology, there's the term binomial nomenclature. And from what I understand, it's how all living things are categorized. Binomial nomenclature is the idea of genus and species. So two names to classify living organisms. And I'm a little bit outside of my understanding here because I'm not like a biological expert, or I'm not a scientist by any means. This is also coming from like my high school understanding of biology. For example, Homo sapiens are what we call humans, right? Homo being the genus, sapien being the species, cannabis being the genus, sativa being the species, genus, species, binomial nomenclature, cannabis indica, right? So it's cannabis is cannabis, right? And it's just funny that we've made up. I know some people are like, Cole, get to the point, because I'm high as fuck right now. It's hilarious that we've made up this legal definition. And I wonder if there's an analog. Like, I wonder if there's any other thing where like there's the scientific definition, but then there's like the, I want to say the legal definition. It's weird how, yeah, this totally conflicts with science. Like there's not a plant called hemp. So I hope I hope you are getting what I'm trying to say. I'm having trouble putting it in the way that I feel is um, most understandable. So I hope that you are able to understand what I'm trying to say. I don't have much else to say at this point. I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that if you visit a shop like Chitiva or a shop like Chitiva or Chitiva itself, that you have a great time. And let me know what your experience is like. I'd love to hear about more of these shops. I think that they should become more of a thing. I'd love to see a combination of this with a consumption lounge. Since I've been visiting these consumption lounges lately, it's very easy to obtain a tobacco retail permit, which is what allows you to open up a cannabis consumption lounge. You also need to get permission from your local board or people that zone you. But those are the two things, which from what I understand are pretty easy to obtain. It's pretty easy to obtain. It's very easy to obtain the tobacco retail license. It's pretty easy to obtain local, support from your local municipality or board. So I'd love to see a combination of a consumption lounge like I visited in Cesar, Illinois, or in Harrisburg, Illinois. And if you've not seen those episodes, I will plug them in just a moment. I got to look up the episode numbers, but I'd love to see a combination of like a consumption lounge with some THCA flower and some THCA concentrate, THCA edibles, because that would literally, almost quite literally, be a dispensary. I really think that would be fucking crazy. And if I might add, the combination of a restaurant and bar on site seems like just the secret sauce to a fucking amazing establishment. So you've got a consumption lounge, a restaurant, and bar on site. And then you could sell those THCA products there. Basically, also have a dispensary on site. So there is somebody that's kind of doing that, let's say legally right now. By legally, I mean they have a dispensary license. They're not doing this whole THCA. Let's call it, they're not selling hemp. I'm not going to call it a loophole because it's not a loophole. It's legal. So this guy, Scott Weiner, he is the co-owner of OK Cannabis, and he has opened up a cannabis dispensary, consumption lounge, restaurant, and bar all on the same site. If you want to hear his perspective, check out episode number 318 of the Chillinois podcast. The other episodes that I was just referencing at where I visited consumption lounges are episodes number 315 with Holly Roeder and episode 316 with Jonathan Ruddick. We also spoke to Phil Cooper and Mindy Moore in episode 317 about high-minded events. Now, high-minded events is not a consumption lounge, but it's usually consumption events. So you will gather at a venue and consumption will be allowed, consumption of some sort. So if you want to check out what I'm talking about, check out episode 317 to hear our conversation with high-minded events. And again, 315 and 316 for conversations at cannabis consumption lounges in the state of Illinois. And then one more time for Scott Weiner, 318. He also has that cannabis consumption lounge. He is the person that inspired me, by the way, that's the secret sauce. And the reason I say that before I let you all go is because I feel like if you're not getting money in from the consumption lounge or your dispensary, then you might be getting money in from your restaurant or bar. And it's good to not to have to rely on only one form of income. Like Scott, for example, it sounded like some people just go to the bakery that's on site. Some people may go to the dispensary, but some people don't. And it's cool that he has multiple forms of revenue. I say cool. He probably says great. It's great for him that he has multiple lines of revenue coming in versus other people where they put all of their eggs in one basket. So consider that. It's pretty easy to open up a consumption lounge. Seems like it's pretty easy to sell these products. And I feel like this is a business line that is waiting to be kind of franchised, for lack of better words. I don't think franchised is the word that I was looking for, but I just feel like there would be more of these businesses if people realized how easy they were to open. And I feel like maybe I'm wrong. I feel like people don't realize how easy these things are to open. Maybe I'm wrong and people are like, no, we realize how easy they are to open, which is why we're not fucking opening them. I don't know. I'm just saying. You'd think you'd see more of these. And I hope that we see more of these. Folks, that's all I have. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.